I'll kind of go through this agenda slowly, give folks another minute or so to join in before we get in too deep. But this is the general flow for this particular session, and future sessions will follow an agenda roughly like this. We'll spend a little bit more time this time just kind of talking about the study group. The impression that I got from the past couple of webinars that I've done is that a lot of folks who are doing this study group and the recent study groups are new to kind of the TWIML community and our study groups. So we'll spend a little bit of time talking about how this one will work. We'll talk about the courses. We won't spend a ton of time there because we went through a lot of that on the webinar. But we'll go through the schedule as well. The check-in is really just kind of where everyone should be at this point, or things to go do if you haven't yet done those things. And then I've got a few slides talking through kind of key concepts from the first week, course one, week one. And then I've got here an explicit note for discussion, but I think as you'll find, this study group and really all of the study groups are very community oriented and interactive. So there's really no need to hold your questions. We'll be using the chat here on Slack pretty extensively. So if you haven't found it, make sure you know where that is, and make sure that you can choose to send messages to individuals or to just participants or to everyone. Make sure if you want to share your questions or comments publicly that you've got everyone selected there. All righty. So just a quick word about the study group. Really the goal of this and the other study groups we do is to provide support and encouragement for folks that are taking courses. It is tough to get through courses, especially a course like this that is expected to take 12 weeks. People come from a variety of different backgrounds, and most of us have day jobs, and it's tough to kind of get through a course like this. And so, what we've found over and over and over again is that when folks work on them together, they are able to, not only stick through it, more consistently, but also learn more. So there are a couple of main tools that we'll use to do this. The first is the AI Enterprise Workflow channel on the Slack. Hopefully most of you or all of you are already on there. And then of course these weekly sessions via Zoom. If you're not already on the Slack, make sure to get connected on the Slack. You do that by signing up for the community at twimlai.com/community, and then when you're there, if you're not familiar with Slack, it's kind of weird finding channels. You have to click on the word channels in the sidebar, and then you'll find the AI Enterprise Workflow channel in that list, and then you join that channel. And then once you're there, feel free to say hi. So yeah, one more word on this. This is, all of the study groups we're doing, except for one that is a new concept for us, are kind of peer support groups. So all of the study group leaders, myself included, are taking these courses to learn more about the topics that are covered in the courses. We're not portraying ourselves to be experts, but really here to kind of guide this discussion and help everyone learn. We do have one course that we're running now called the causality course that is being taught by the instructor of an online course, but all of the other ones we do are, just kind of volunteers working to help themselves and other folks learn. And so this is an opportunity to kind of start the, the community and participation process. I'd love for folks to, we don't have too many folks to do a quick sound off. I'd love to get folks to kind of chime in on kind of their backgrounds and what they're hoping to get out of the course from the study group. Anyone want to start us off?
Well, but first thing, Martin, your microphone is blowing up the audio. So, but yeah. Oh, okay. So my name is Pedro. I'm from Brazil. I actually work with together with data scientists. I've used Python myself for the last maybe 2 or 3 years to solve some enterprise problems, optimize workflows. But the main goal for me in this course is actually to know better the kind of work and frameworks that my guys use so that I can better guide them and understand better what they're doing and actually come up with suggestions and use the mechanics myself as well. So it's more out of curiosity and so that I can better guide my work fellows.
Cool. And then just going to interrupt this sound off real quick. Sahil mentioned that the link that I sent via email is different than the one that I shared in Slack. Is that true? Did anyone else have that experience?
Yeah, I did. That's why I joined late, because that one is, I think, still being used by the other study group.
So the email that I just sent?
Yes.
705-788-376.
I think it was the email that you sent last night, like the join a meeting button goes to the wrong one, but then there's below it says like copy and paste, and that one goes to the right
Wow.
That's correct. I used the button.
Got it.
So others may find their way here in a few minutes.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll copy that link. Sorry about that. If that for anyone who that affected. But would love to let's continue on. Anyone else want to share kind of their background and what they're hoping to get out of the course in the study group?
Sure, I'll go next. I spoke up. I'm Jose. I live in Chicago. My background is I actually have a lot of work. I've built a few different startups on the operations and finance side, not so much on the data science side. But before that, I was once a teacher, and then after that, I got an MBA, and then I worked for a large management consulting firm, did a lot of big data work. So I did a lot of R and a decent amount of Stata as well. Not so much Python in that world, but then I also did learn Python along the way. And now I am I'm looking forward to getting more involved in the data science, machine learning community, and moving away from the operation finance roles and more into a data science AI type role. So interested in the course because of that.
Nice.
All right, I'll go next. I'm Rob. I'm from Indiana, and I kind of wear two hats. One is I've been involved in a digital therapeutics company, and kind of through that I've developed a pretty good understanding of machine learning and algorithms, but virtually nothing on how to implement it on an enterprise scale. And the other hat I wear is I'm a university professor, and I've persuaded my university that it's important to teach people about machine learning, and I'm trying to get a better handle on the enterprise part that surrounds it. That's not going to be a focus of what I teach, but I want to have a working understanding of it.
Okay, cool.
I'll go next. Rob will probably find this a little bit interesting. So I'm Jess, and I'm in the Seattle area, and I've been working with data science in higher education, specifically with institutional research data, and then also academic health sciences data, medicine, pharmacy, nursing, and public health. And I've been working with machine learning for probably about 2 years now. And I recently did the Berkeley Full Stack Data Science program, and it was like drinking from a fire hose. So I'm definitely interested in, I guess, kind of data ops and ML ops. And so I'm looking for a really great study group to kind of go through it, maybe just a somewhat of a slower pace. And I've been working as a data science consultant with one of the regional accreditors for about 6 months, and I've now been hired in the position of VP for data science and analytics. And with that, I will be helping 163 institutions work on their data science programs. So I think really this operational side is just going to be critical and key for my work. So that's why I'm here.
Cool. Let's get another one or two.
Hey, I'm Jim. I'm a software engineer. I've worked a lot on enterprise applications, but for the last 5 years, doing like Java stuff especially. For the last 5 years, I've been writing R and doing more statistical analysis, a little bit of machine learning. So I kind of come at it more from the side of, as a software engineer who's getting a little bit into the data science and machine learning area. And so this particular part, I see a real problem as I worked with people who came from the other side as pure data scientists, like out of psychology, PhD people. They could create a one-off model and do the statistical analysis really well, but didn't have much notion of how to get things to production all. So that's kind of where I see my niche, is to be able to help out in that area. That's why I'm taking this class.
Cool, cool. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, I'm Maria, and I live in London and work in London. I work for Cisco, and I work in a team that's developing software solutions for part of operation teams. And we are just starting to implement data science and machine learning within our team and with the data we have. And we're at the very, very beginning, at the first step. And hoping to get more into machine learning as the time goes. So yeah, I'm taking this course in order to understand better the concept. I have some experience with data science, but none with machine learning. And yeah, I'm really just looking to get familiar with the concepts. Yeah, that's about it.
All right, awesome, awesome. So a lot of kind of a broad variety of backgrounds and experiences. Some folks have experience doing data science, and others are, just learning. And I think that's a great mix of backgrounds for this course and study group. On the webinar, I was worried that we might scare people off because Ray kind of mentioned that, folks should have 2-3 years of practical kind of data science, machine learning experience to do this study group. But my experience looking through the course materials is that it is progressive. Like, we're not going to spend a lot of time, although this group, we can help folks get up and running with stuff like Jupyter Notebooks and some of the basic tools, but the course kind of assumes that. But a lot of the, beyond the tools, kind of the knowledge is progressive, and, we'll cover a lot of that in the course. Of course, with these kinds of courses, there's always an opportunity, or it's always the case that you get out of it what you put in, and you can go through and kind of take the course and kind of go through the basic material, and if that is not challenging enough for you, or you have more time, you can kind of dig deeper into the various references or understand, the source code more thoroughly, or you can, do projects. So, feel free to use the course as a kind of a framework for your learning. A lot of the courses that we do, this is the first time that we're doing this course, this particular sequence, but a lot of the courses that we do, like the Fast.ai courses, I did the first study group for that one maybe a year and a half ago, and I've gone through that one and a half-ish times. But we've had folks that have, started with the one that I went through and then have, taken it a second time and gone on to, be a study group host/leader for it, multiple times. So a lot of times you can, or, often, if you take these courses multiple times, you can continue to kind of learn and grow with the material. So a little bit more about these courses. So this AI Enterprise Workflow Specialization on Coursera consists of 6 courses. Each of the courses has 2 weeks worth of material. The courses tend to run around 3 hours of content. That's a combination of video and written content. And that's about the limit of, that's what Coursera considers a week worth of content, anywhere between 2 and 4 hours of content. And I tend to think that, for that amount of content, I expect to spend 8-9 hours a week to finish, to kind of really go through the material, work on the exercises and the quizzes, that kind of thing. The general goal of this course, you know this because you're here, but it's really aiming to give you an understanding of the way to apply machine learning models and processes within an enterprise context. A lot of the courses that we do are model focused, and so we spend a lot of time learning about how to build different types of models, but not really about all of the other parts of the process of delivering value using those kinds of models within the enterprise. So in the very first part of this course, as hopefully you've seen already, we spend time asking kind of the basic questions, like how do we know what problems to even go after, or how do we formulate our problems. And then towards the end of the course, we'll have models and we'll be asking the questions, how do we get these models into production so that the systems that we want to integrate them with can access them. And so we'll be working on this for the next 14 weeks or so. The first 12 of those weeks is focused on reviewing the course material, and the last couple of those weeks will be focused on the capstone project. So I'm not going to review the specifics of each of the courses, but this is the general schedule that we'll follow for the study group. So this is the check-in that I mentioned. So at this point, you should have access to the courses via Coursera, access to the community Slack, and have joined the AI Enterprise Workflow Slack channel. The first set of lessons, and actually throughout all the lessons, this particular sequence of courses weaves in using the IBM tools like Watson Studio. Watson Studio is basically kind of a hosted Jupyter notebook, and you can run the Jupyter notebooks anywhere. You can run them locally, or you can run them on another service. But you should have a place to run notebooks. IBM is also supporting this study group, and they are encouraging everyone to join their learning community. That's at this link here, community.ibm.com/community/user. This is the same learning community that you're kind of encouraged to join to get access to the free month of Coursera. And then, of course, this study group is focused on the materials from the first week of the course. So hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. Before we go on, has anyone had any trouble with any of these issues? I think one thing that's still outstanding is the like a free week of Coursera. When I signed up for the IBM Learning Community, I had already started my Coursera trial, and that free Coursera month didn't click for me. So I'm working on trying to figure out how to get that applied or what the process is. Has anyone successfully applied that? Meaning you're post trial and you got the free month? Anybody bother?
No, I haven't. I do have a Coursera subscription that keeps charging me monthly.
So for all of their courses?
You know, I don't know. I'll sort it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I should have mentioned auditing is also an option. Someone had a problem finding that. I think the trick is you can't audit an entire sequence or specialization, but if you go to the individual courses, you can audit. The main difference with the auditing is that your quizzes aren't graded, or you may not even have access to seeing quizzes.
You can see the quizzes. You just don't get a grade.
Oh, okay, great. So auditing is an option as well. Anyone have any other, is everyone on the Slack? Has everyone had it, or has anyone had any other issues with any of these things? I did I signed up for Watson Studio. This was the first time I've used it, and it seems like a reasonable place to do notebooks. It's, you know, hoping that through the course I learn a little bit more about how it works. It has your basic notebook functionality, and it seems to have some collaborative features as well. Has anyone used Watson Studio before this course?
Yeah, I actually, I'm almost finishing the IBM Data Science Professional course on Coursera as well. So they do use the IBM Watson Studio, but I guess I haven't seen this course's full contents. But if we just need a Jupyter notebook, there's actually no, I mean, you can use it, of course, but the good thing about it is that it also has like all these other features like NLP frameworks already preset for you, and chatbots and all this kind of stuff. So it's more about the integration with all these things with the code you run on your Jupyter notebooks.
Yeah, I would suggest if you're someone who has, you know, maybe done some data science courses a while ago and are looking to apply, you know, looking to take this course but haven't kind of messed with this stuff in a while, the Watson Studio is a great way to get started because you don't have to mess with like dealing with your Python versions and installing the right packages and all this kind of stuff. It's all just there for you. And there's a you know, there's a free tier, so there's no charge to use it.
All
right,
hi,
cool.
am I coming through now?
Sure, who's that?
Vince here.
Hey, Vince.
I was just going to say I did manage to get the free month.
Okay, cool.
It just I saw in the channels somebody said they would send an email, so I went to Coursera and I was a little doubtful about it, so I waited. It took more than an hour, maybe 2 hours, but an email came saying, here's a link to your thing, and then followed that. and it automatically applied.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think if you started the 7-day trial before you did that, then it doesn't automatically apply.
Right, right. You have to do it with the link that has to be your way into it.
Yeah, yeah. So if anyone, cares about that, shoot me a note in the channel or start a thread or something, and I'll try to figure it out for those folks. All right, cool. So the learning objectives for the first course, this is the first 2 weeks of the course. So week 1 and week 2 of course 1 are as follows. So, learning the advantages of carrying out data science using a structured process, describing the stages of design thinking and how they correspond to the AI enterprise workflow, discussing strategies used to prioritize business opportunities. And I've got these 3 bolded because I think that's where kind of the line between week 1 and week 2 stops. 4 is explaining where data science and data engineering have the most overlap in the AI workflow, explain the purpose of testing and data ingestion, describing the use case for sparse matrices as a target destination for data ingestion, and knowing the initial steps that can be taken towards automation of data ingestion pipelines. How far are folks gotten in the course in general? Have most folks done the first week at least?
No.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, so 50-50?
I'm about halfway through the week 1.
Okay, cool. I think the first half of week 1 is about the course. There's a lot of kind of general information about the course and kind of the course's objectives, this kind of stuff, what you should hope to learn. And then the second week of course 1 dives into some of these kinds of issues. I think it's an introduction to kind of business thinking around machine learning, but my impression is that it's fairly high level. Anyone want to share their impression of the first week?
This is Jim. I like the discussion of the design process, the fact that you have to look at the business opportunities first and stuff. There's surprisingly a lot of people jump over that phase. I was a little disappointed actually. They mentioned the word iterative here and there, but I didn't think their flow really demonstrated that or talked about. Again, I'm still kind of partway through that week 1 of data collection objectives where it talks all about the different phases. But that was one thing that, my experience is just that you really need to emphasize the iterative nature very early on. It said something like, well, this is the phase where you collect all the data. And it kind of never said later that you might have to go back and collect data again, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also got the impression that again, this was kind of a high level overview, and we'll go into a lot more detail on all of these, or on this step in the second week. But I definitely agree with you about the iterative nature of this.
I think, just as a quick reaction, I agree. I think I like the emphasis on empathizing and understanding the business.
Yeah.
I think that's, in my experience, something teams often forget to do and just start digging through data instead of really understanding the problem, the people they're working with, and what their problems are before digging. So I thought that was helpful. I think I was sort of lucky. I had a day off of work this week, so I got a little bit ahead and started working on the second week. And I like that the second week was a little bit more like roll up your sleeves and work with some code.
Yeah.
So I was excited about that, and I'm excited as that progresses more. But and then I think, I don't know, for me, the one thing I struggle with a little bit, maybe I'm just too used to using my Jupyter notebook. I had trouble using Watson. I just kind of kept on defaulting to using my own on my computer, but I don't know, maybe I'll get used to it in time.
Cool. So we'll come back to kind of general discussion. I've got some points here just to kind of talk through, and these are also kind of for general discussion, but the first thing was that I wanted to ask about is the readiness quiz. Did folks have a good experience with the readiness quiz? Did anyone have questions about that, or want to go through any of those items? Everyone get all the code examples to run with the readiness quiz? Oh, I did want to mention about that. When I went through this, I mentioned it to the IBM folks. I don't know if they were able to get it fixed because they had to go to the Coursera folks, but I was getting a ton of timeouts. Like I would submit have my code examples and then submit it for grading. And then, it'd say I got a 40%, but then when I went through a bunch of my code examples didn't run. And if I submitted it the same thing again, I would get, maybe 60% and a different set of code examples didn't run. Seems to be some wonkiness with the Coursera grading platform. Did anyone else run into that?
Yeah, but I only had maybe one function that didn't run. So.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about any of those items, or need a refresher on any of the concepts that were brought up? All right, cool.
One thing, maybe, I don't know, maybe feedback to them was some of them I thought were a little unclear what exactly we were supposed to write in the code. Like you had a function, but then they would say use certain values. So it was unclear how they wanted you to handle that. So.
Yeah, I found that to be the case for one of them in particular. It was one of the distributions used language that was slightly different. So I ended up changing the parameter names. I think it was the Poisson distribution or the geometric distribution. One of those distributions, they used K1 and K2 as the parameters instead of your more common mu and x for the distribution. Is that
that's the distribution.
Is that the one that you were referring to? Does that ring a bell at all?
Oh, that wasn't me actually. I don't know who said that they had problems. I didn't. So.
I was the one who said it, and it was I just didn't know whether you're supposed to write a general function and they were going to run it by putting in the values, or you were supposed to set. What I ended up doing was setting up, using what do you call it? Like for the parameters, saying so, K1 equals K1 and defining K1 so that it would run all by itself, because I wasn't sure what they wanted.
Yeah, so let's see. Generally, for these, I did them in a notebook first and kind of ran them, got them working, and then plugged them in. And again, I forget which one it was that had the K1 and K2. I think it might have been this mu.
Yeah, it's the Poisson distribution.
So I just renamed it mu because that made more sense to me. And they're gonna call it like this with the values in the given order. And so if you have something that, like you can name the parameters whatever you want, and you have to reverse the parameters when you're calling the CDF function if you use the stats, and then it should work for you. But generally, they're wanting you to implement a function, and then they're going to call the function with the grader with the values that they give you, and check that the output is what they're expecting. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, that's okay. It was just the way they said it. They said use these value, use this and this for the value. So I don't know whether we were supposed to almost hard code that in there, or they were going to run it using those values. So
well, it was weird because in most cases, no, it didn't mean that. But like in this vector sum one, you were supposed to hard code your matrix transformation thing into the specific 10 rows and 15 columns. So, yeah, I had similar questions or issues with one of the, let's see if I can get back to my slides here. One of the other quizzes was like, let's see if I can find it. The process models and design thinking check for understanding quiz. That one was asking you to, well, maybe we should come back to that because it's, it's a little bit later on, but let me get my share back going again. Let's see. Okay, so, well, it was the design thinking part. So with that particular quiz, they were asked. I thought the questions were just worded weirdly. If folks have gotten to that, they're like, you have this cafe. They have this Sherlock Holmes game scenario that they create, and they want you to kind of think through and answer questions about how do you ensure, or such as like, how do you ensure new games drive revenue? And they want you to write down ways that you can validate the business question into testable hypothesis. I just thought the question was weirded kind of strangely. Once you get the feedback, the answer, the answer made sense. But some of these kind of essay questions are worded kind of weirdly, I thought, or at least not clear. So these were kind of the key concepts, or at least the key concepts for me in this first week. The design thinking one I thought was really interesting. I also really appreciated the framing of kind of your data collection process as being one of empathy, and it really kind of drills in this idea of getting as close as possible to the source of the data and trying to understand that really deeply, and especially the people that are involved in it. And I also, for me, there was also some kind of new language introduced, the playbacks, hills, and sponsor users. In my head, I kind of mapped this to like agile software development, where playbacks are like stand-ups and hills are like user stories, and the whole idea of kind of keeping sponsor users in the loop, or like doing regular demos with your customer. Did anyone else make that correlation, or does anyone use design thinking in their work?
Yeah, I actually work with a lot of startups. In my company, we actually make some programs to incentivize the development, and we use government funding to fund startups so they can make some more interesting research.
Mhm.
And we see a lot of them using design thinking, and it's more of it's not really even a methodology. It's like of a way of thinking, I guess. So it's not uncommon to see them mapping design thinking concepts and guidelines to their own operation. So when I saw that IBM chose to use words like playbacks and hills and sponsor users, especially the hills ones, I'm pretty sure they just use it so they can say the phrase "we climbed the hill" or something. To yeah. I mean, this is we see this every time. I mean, startups and enterprises will use language so that they can motivate themselves internally. But design thinking is really, I guess it doesn't really have its roots on agile development, but it does have a lot of similarities. So it's kind of common to see each enterprise, each startup, each company using, defining their own words to kind of mean the same thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else use it or run across it in the wild? Yeah, to be honest, I'd come across it in reading, but I've not come across companies that have used it, to my knowledge at least. Although, again, the agile concepts and different methodologies, of course. But I like the model. I think it's an interesting one, and I thought the way that they related it to the data science methodology or process was interesting as well. Understanding that the links aren't going to be perfect or kind of one-to-one.
Yeah, actually, if I may add some more, it's just that I found this to be very interesting because this is, I agree that this is the actual first time that I see the concepts of design thinking applied to development in itself, because it is actually pretty common already when especially startups. My culture is inside the startup world, so I don't really have a lot of contact with big enterprises, but they usually use design thinking. They have been using it for years to create their product roadmaps and develop their MVPs to deploy and try out customer responses. So I find that this is actually this is a pretty interesting moment where this concept that has been using in the product development, but in the enterprise and organizational level and not in the development phases, is kind of figuring itself into the development phase, and it's something that should have been done already. This is the first course that I see that actually touches on this. So this is actually a good indicator of a kind of a new framework of course modeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciated that aspect of it, that it is something that you can apply broadly across the organization. So you can run marketing projects using this, you can run development projects using this, you can run other business projects using this, and then everyone is speaking a common language. Unlike some other unique software development methodologies where you're talking about sprints and maybe another part of the business doesn't really understand what that means. I thought that could be pretty powerful. Cool. So speaking of that empathy stage, the main takeaways for me here were, again, getting as close to the source of the data as possible. Usually by interviewing the people involved. They gave some good examples of how you get into these situations where you think that the things in the data mean one thing, or that the data, you think you understand where the data is coming from and how it's generated, but then you talk to the folks that are involved in creating it and realize that it is very different from what you thought. You can save yourself a lot of time if you start with this empathy process, or this aspect of kind of empathizing with kind of the source of the data. And then kind of identifying the business problem, using that to guide obtaining all of the relevant data, and then translating the business problem into a testable set of hypotheses. You know, my conversations with folks that are applying machine learning across, you know, wide varieties of fields, the thing that comes up over and over again is the importance of kind of the problem formulation, which is, you know, many of these steps. You can go in wildly different directions and get wildly different results to the same kind of core, you know, business challenge, you know, based on the way you think about or formulate the problem. And I thought they had some pretty decent examples in the material about this. Any thoughts or comments on the data collection aspect of this?
Well, I do think that that issue of quantifying this proposed solution is really important. So, you know, something like I say this cafe thing, we want to increase revenue by 20% or whatever, because that really helps you to know what the business is thinking. A lot of times they're going to say something like, well, we want to make more money, but that doesn't really help you, and you can't, it's going to be hard to prove at the end of your thing, at the end of your development, whether or not you did that. I mean, you can say, well, yeah, we made, you know, 2%. And they say, well, what we really meant was 30%. And so you didn't really succeed. And so you really need to know that up front, of having this notion of a testable hypothesis, or knowing when you're done, when it's good enough. Like, that's the other thing is, I don't know, maybe the goal is really to, they really wanted this chatbot thing for some reason, you know, then that's important to know that that's the part of it, has to be part of the solution. And it's very different if they say, well, we want people to spend 50% more time in the cafe versus we want to have 20% more revenue, or we want to sell 10% more coffee. I mean, all those things are really would determine how you're going to approach the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did an interview recently. I'm trying to remember who the interview was with. Maybe it was the recent interview with Nemo Semret, who works for a company called Grow Intelligence that does, basically they build machine learning models for the agriculture industry. And he was talking about how, you know, how bad the data is that they have access to, and how, you know, little has been done in their industry, and you know, how much they can do with relatively simple models. And I asked them, you know, how do they know, you know, when to stop? And because you can always kind of tweak a model. And he said, oh, it's not actually hard to know, for us to know when to stop, because we always start with a very clear, you know, business case. Maybe for a given problem, you know, the industry standard is currently 40% accuracy or something like that, whatever it happens to be. And we know that we can make a huge difference by getting it to 60%. So it's not, you know, even if it's not close to where we want it to be, I'm not making up those numbers, but you can listen to it in the interview. The point being, they know going in that, you know, what metric they need to achieve in order to call it a win. And so they're not kind of tempted to, you know, continue to iterate, you know, and do fancier and fancier things just because they can.
And it's surprisingly hard to come up to state the business issue that way. I mean, it takes a little bit of effort, because a lot of times people won't actually know. They don't even know how much they're making right now, or they don't know what the current percentage is. So, but it's really important to do that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that speaks to this kind of getting as close to the source of the data by interviewing. And there was another one here. I think relating to prioritizing the business opportunities, really understanding the, the needs of the stakeholders and kind of articulating the business problem or business question or hypothesis kind of in their language, to them and getting them bought in.
I'll just kind of chime in here. A lot in my work, this really comes up with kind of vague targets or vague goals that you're shooting for. It's almost sort of like if you would run a business saying, our goal is to maximize profits, whatever that means, right? And you don't have any sort of intermediate goals related to that. You'll see that a lot, right? So we want to improve learning outcomes, right?
Yeah.
And so there's it's very, like, you're not sure what you're aiming for. And you'll even see that often in health research. You want to improve health outcomes in a, some specific area. So this actually is really important. It comes up all the time and is really part of the work I do, helping to clarify, what we know, what we can know, what would be a reasonable achievement, and all those kinds of things. That's part of the consulting process.
Yeah, I think when I talk to folks that are responsible for kind of broad ML portfolios, sounds like a similar role as you, Jess. One of the things that they say is the most important thing about their job, and maybe the most difficult thing about their job, is this kind of portfolio management and prioritization, and kind of setting business expectations. And there's this tension between, taking on kind of low-hanging fruit, quick win projects that have, very kind of measurable and demonstrable value and can be iterated on and achieved very quickly, and taking on these larger kind of, some folks think of them as moonshot types of projects, but ones that can really, change, broad business outcomes. But yet still those have to be well defined also. But I guess the key point that I'm trying to mention here is that I hear over and over again, the balance of these is, different for every company. Some companies are much more, need to be much more focused, or some teams need to be much more focused on quick wins because that's what kind of their leadership is, attuned to. Other, companies want to, their leadership is trying to shoot for the stars, and they have the opportunity to, grow their, data science teams to be large ones, but, they're not going to do that just by kind of incremental, projects. They need to also establish a vision for what's possible through big projects. And, the managing, the balancing of kind of these short wins versus these bigger wins is one that is quite challenging and comes up quite a lot. Pedro, did you have I see a comment here in the chat. This whole problem of lack of data hygiene. You want to elaborate on that one, Pedro?
Yeah, sure. So let me just see what Sahil wrote here. Yeah, so when I was working more directly with data analysis and everything, I noticed that people don't, people in the operational side, but not in the development side, they don't quite know how we use data. So they know what we can do with data, but they don't know how it should be formatted or how it should be stored. And sometimes we care too much about our technical side, like database building and correct relationship diagrams and everything. but we don't actually focus too much on talking to them and telling them the importance, for instance, of not using special characters in a field, in a form that they use every day. And this kind of tiny details can actually, it's like a snowball down a hill, so it just gets bigger. And when you finally reach, like, okay, now let me look at this data set, it's a mess, but not because of how it was technically conceived, but how the operation is interacting with it. So I'm not quite sure I'd say it's bad management skills, but it's more like they don't know the management side of the operational and sales and marketing. They usually don't actually know what data management should look like. So it's not something that's on their top list of priorities. So they just, for them, it's just one more thing, a common thing that everybody kind of knows how it works. And that ends up creating a lot of problems in data wrangling. So, and that's because of this disconnect from between operation and technical sides. That's my view on it.
Mhm. And I agree. I think this is simple. It's just to inform them so that they be aware of of their part of the job on the overall what their job would result like. I think it just give information to the operation team so that just will be resolved.
Yeah, you gotta actually take in an account that you have to kind of you need a little cultural change inside the organization, because usually if you just say, you know, this is how you make, like, I don't know, a formatting guide that you send you send to everybody's email, they just won't look at it. Usually, unfortunately, usually in enterprise settings, people mostly do things only when they see a benefit for their work. So if you just tell them that your job will be easier if they did something, that's not much of an incentive as if you can convince them that by tidying up their data, your job can help theirs. So it's I suggest there always needs to be this extra step of kind of trying to persuade instead of just inform.
Kind of speaks once again to this idea of empathy. Best way to persuade them is to understand what their issues are and articulate what you need in the terms of you know, what works for them, what helps them.
Yep.
I saw somebody found the crayons here. I didn't even know that existed in Zoom. So the prioritization criteria that were mentioned in the course were stakeholder opinion. They made an interesting distinction, I thought, again along the lines of this empathy idea, between the stakeholder or user's opinion and the quote unquote HIPPO, highest paid person's opinion. Those are not always the same thing, and it's important to distinguish those. The feasibility of the project, and sometimes it's hard to really understand feasibility until you dig in, and you know, the impact or the business value, and that kind of jumped into the discussion of, you know, how to quantify the impact and business value, and like what the different elements of ROI are. I think there were some questions on that in one of the quizzes. I don't even know how to erase this thing. Okay. The next piece, the next kind of interesting thing I thought here was the element of the scientific method. They spent quite a bit of time here, and I think this is really foreshadowing some discussion that recurs. I believe it's in one of the weeks in course 2, maybe course 3, but there's quite a bit of time spent on like experimentation and null hypothesis testing and that kind of thing. But I think as far as this particular material goes, the main idea was to really emphasize that, you know, as a friend of mine, Jennifer Prenke, says, the most important word in data science is science. And this speaks to one of the comments that was made earlier, that that is an inherently iterative process in which you're kind of formulating the question, generating a hypothesis that you think can help address the question, making some prediction, conducting experiments, that should be plural, but in an iterative loop. So conduct an experiment, analyze the results of that experiment, draw a conclusion, conduct another experiment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any thoughts on the scientific method aspect of the material?
I would say just that it's often overlooked in the interest of time, you know, or under the thought of being highly productive.
I think one of the dangers in kind of the advancement of the, you know, machine learning tooling is that, you know, there's a danger that, you know, we kind of pull some tool off a box, kind of throw our data at it and expect it to give us the answers, and that works sometimes, but you know, for kind of unique challenges that a business might face that you would want to apply machine learning and data science to, you know, really understanding the assumptions that go into even the use of a tool, the way that, you know, the question, the inherent or implicitly formulated question that tool is answering is important. And sometimes, you know, just changing the way you ask the question, you know, changes the approach totally, you know, renders a tool irrelevant because, you know, there's a totally different way to approach the question that gets you to your business objective in a simpler way. There was also a section on gathering data. I kind of took this as a bit of a survey. They talked a little bit about ETL, ETL being extract, transform, and load. You know, basically, in large enterprises, you've got data being collected, you know, often in a number of places, you know, different data silos, and you are using ETL tools of one variety or another, or pipelines to get data from those kind of source silos into a data warehouse or a data lake, or, you know, otherwise ready them for analysis. This section also kind of walked through the different types of data sources that you might encounter, you know, different types of text files, comma delimited or delimited files, JSON files, databases, NoSQL versus SQL, web scraping and APIs were mentioned, big data and streaming were mentioned. They, I believe, incorrectly referred to HDFS as Hadoop Distributed File Share. I confirmed actually that they are the only, the use in this course and someone affiliated with the course are the only two uses in all of Google or Google's index of that. It's Hadoop distributed file system. And Spark is mentioned. Spark, it will be used in the, I think, courses 5 and 6 or 6 at least for model deployment. But there was not really a lot of detail presented in this section. It was really just an overview of different, different places your data might come from. Did anyone have any thoughts or observations on this list or this section? I thought it was interesting background. So, those are the main takeaways that I had from the lessons. And I want to open it up to general discussion. Anyone have any particular things that they'd like to share about what you learned or stumbling blocks you ran into with the material or the quizzes, additional ways that the lessons related to your experience, anything you found interesting that we haven't discussed from this week's lesson, things that you're doing to further your understanding as homework or how it's applying to your personal projects or other resources that you found. Anyone want to chime in? Especially anyone who hasn't yet had a chance to chime in. Any takers? All righty. Well, we have had quite a bit of good discussion going through this already, and our next step is to review the week 2 materials. If you're still working your way through week 1, then definitely continue that and try to catch up with week 2. Of course, if you run into any issues or want to share any observations or thoughts or kind of spark any discussions around any of the questions that I had on the previous slide, feel free to do that in the Slack. And of course, these sessions are best when folks come prepared with questions and discussion points, thoughts, ideas, experience shares for the next meetup. So as you're going through the material, definitely think about those things that would be good to bring up on our next meetup. Any closing thoughts?
Thanks for leading us through that. I will certainly be prepared next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah,
all righty.
thanks.
Have a great rest of the weekend, everyone, and we'll see you all on the Slack. Let me know if you need anything or have any challenges with any of the material.
Yeah, one quick question. I noticed up at the left you're recording this, so
yes,
is that available someplace?
So these will be posted. I will make sure a link gets put in the Slack. I think they're also going to be posted over on the IBM community, but I'll drop a link. They'll end up on YouTube, and then I'll post a link to the Slack as well.
Okay, terrific.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
I haven't started this course yet, but I would like to know if the course infrastructure, notebooks, etc., are working properly, or do we need to spend much time setting up the resources, or how is it?
So I signed up for the Watson Studio for the first time when I started the course, and used it for the exercises and kind of the code walkthroughs, and it works fine. And if you go that route, you're basically just creating an account and following a tutorial on how to set up a project in Watson Studio, and you don't have to think about installing stuff locally. That is an option. We're just using standard libraries so far, and I believe that's the case throughout the course, like NumPy and SciPy and the like. So you can do all this on your own laptop, but the Watson Studio makes it easy for you to get started without having to deal with any of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
If I can add real quick, like I said earlier, I like using Jupyter Notebook on my computer.
Yeah.
And I found it, I've done most of the exercises, and I found it pretty easy to make everything work too. And if you don't know how to set up locally, there's a lot of resources. Like a long time ago, I found Code Academy and other resources like that useful in just helping me set up SciPy, NumPy, and Jupyter Notebook and all that. So
Yeah.
but that's it's either way, I found it pretty easy to work through.
Absolutely.
I also had one other configuration which I found easy to use, which is Jupyter has a Docker image you can get. It's called a data science-notebook, and I ran that on my local machine so it wouldn't affect my other configurations. And that worked really great. You just start it up, and then from the browser, again on my local machine, you just access the Jupyter Notebook running in that data science notebook on my local machine. That worked great too.
Cool. Yeah, if you've already got Docker and know how to use it, then that can be a really easy way to get things going as well. There's a bit of a learning curve there if you're not familiar with it, but we do cover Docker in this sequence. I forget which course is, probably 5 when we get into deployment. I'm happy to stick around and take any questions or any additional questions, or if anyone has any discussion topics or wants to chat.
No, not for me, but thanks again, Sam.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.